Imagine a world where every choice you think is yours, isn't. Every glance, every word, every advertisement subtly pulls you in directions you don't notice. You walk through life believing you're in control, but invisible hands are guiding you. A smile, a gesture, even silence can manipulate your thoughts. What if I told you persuasion surrounds you constantly? You are being persuaded, right now. The human mind craves certainty, yet it is fragile, easily nudged by suggestion. Consider a magician, showing one hand while the trick happens in the other. Or a simple nod from a stranger making you comply without question. These are not rare events, they happen in daily life, everywhere. Social experiments have shown our decisions are rarely as free as we believe. Even intelligence cannot fully protect you from subtle influence. In ancient marketplaces, merchants understood this instinctive mind. They would draw your eye to one product while selling another, a tactic still used today. Online, algorithms do the same thing, bait and switch disguised as recommendation. One moment you are curious, the next you are trapped in a pattern you didn't notice. Your brain is wired to follow the easiest path, to rely on heuristics. And manipulators exploit this wiring every single day. Take the famous Milgram experiment. Ordinary people were willing to deliver pain to strangers just because authority told them to. It was simple, quiet, almost invisible coercion. The lesson? Trust, authority, and expectation shape choices more than morality alone. The world teaches us to obey without realizing it. And most of the time, we comply without question. Even in friendships, manipulation hides in plain sight. A compliment can be a subtle anchor for guilt later. A favor done can become a lever for influence. People rarely see it coming because it feels natural. These social strings are woven invisibly into everyday life. Every interaction carries hidden power dynamics that shape your decisions. Even marketing thrives on this invisible dance. Ever noticed how discounts feel urgent? How limited availability pressures your mind? This is no accident. Anchoring and scarcity exploit your brain's shortcuts. You think you're choosing freely, yet the path is pre-designed. The digital world is a web of silent persuasion, guiding choices before you even notice them. Social proof is another invisible force. When others nod, smile, or approve, your brain unconsciously follows. One viral post, one trend, one crowd can reshape behavior instantly. Even highly rational people succumb to the herd instinct. Every like, every share, every recommendation strengthens the subtle pull. You are constantly balancing your independence against unseen social pressure. Algorithms now amplify these effects, learning your desires, fears, and biases. They whisper suggestions tailored perfectly to exploit your cognitive weaknesses. You scroll for seconds, but the machine molds your choices for hours. One click leads to another, a hidden sequence you never consciously planned. The very tools meant to inform shape what you believe, want, and fear. Even seemingly trivial choices carry hidden strings. That morning coffee, the song you clicked, the headline you read, all are subtly nudged. Each nudge compounds, shaping behavior silently over days, weeks, years. You may never see the sum of these influences. And yet, they are powerful enough to redirect life paths. The mind is a landscape of invisible traps. This is the paradox of everyday persuasion. It is subtle, yet unavoidable. It whispers rather than shouts, hiding in smiles, in urgency, in authority. The world is a carefully designed stage, and most of us are actors unaware of the script. Awareness is the first step, but even then, the influence never fully disappears. The dance between free will and manipulation continues, silently, all around us. A man walks into a store with a simple goal. He wants the cheapest phone that works. He already decided his budget before entering. He believes the decision is rational and safe. Within 1 hour, he will leave with the most expensive phone available. And he will feel proud of the decision. The salesperson greets him with warmth and confidence. They do not show the cheap phone first. Instead, they present the most expensive model in the entire store. The price sounds absurd and almost laughable. The man instantly rejects it. And at that exact moment, the trap quietly closes. The brain creates a reference point without permission. That extreme price becomes the new mental baseline. Everything cheaper now feels safer and reasonable. The customer feels relief instead of suspicion. He believes he has regained control. In reality, his perception has already shifted. The second phone appears calmly and quietly. It is still expensive, but no longer shocking. The difference between the two prices feels like a victory. The brain translates relief into satisfaction. The man feels smart for rejecting the first option. The switch has successfully replaced the bait. This is the anchoring effect in action. A cognitive illusion that reshapes value instantly. The numbers never changed at all. Only the comparison changed. Yet the decision now feels logical and justified. The mind quietly accepts the new reality. Imagine this tactic used everywhere at once. In news headlines, in political speeches, in daily conversations. Millions of people adjusting their expectations silently. Entire societies shifting their idea of normal. All because the starting point was carefully chosen. The scale becomes terrifying. History quietly confirms this pattern. Drastic ideas become acceptable after worse ideas appear first. Extreme proposals make moderate ones feel reasonable. Over time, the baseline keeps moving. People adapt without realizing the shift. The frame of reality slowly drifts. Humans rarely judge things in isolation. We compare constantly without noticing. Our minds crave contrast to feel safe. Remove the comparison and certainty disappears. Introduce contrast and confidence returns. Manipulators understand this deeply. The first thing you see is never random. Someone chooses the order carefully. Someone designs what feels reasonable. Someone shapes the frame before the decision exists. By the time you decide, the stage is already set. And you never saw the preparation. This is the elegance of everyday persuasion. It does not force or threaten. It gently guides and reframes. It makes the path feel natural and self-chosen. And the more invisible it is, the more powerful it becomes. That is the art of the bait and switch. Now imagine the same tactic inside relationships. Not stores. Not advertisements. Real human connection. Where trust replaces suspicion. And emotions replace logic. This is where persuasion becomes far more dangerous. A woman starts a new job full of excitement. Her coworker immediately becomes friendly and helpful. Compliments arrive daily and feel genuine. Small favors are exchanged casually. Trust begins forming quietly. The emotional anchor has been placed. Weeks pass and the kindness continues consistently. The woman feels safe around this person. She begins sharing thoughts and frustrations freely. The relationship feels natural and mutual. Nothing seems manipulative. And that is the most important part. Then one day, a request appears unexpectedly. A small favor that bends company rules slightly. It feels uncomfortable but harmless. Saying no suddenly feels rude and disloyal. The emotional switch quietly activates. The decision feels personal now. This is reciprocity bias at work. When someone gives, we feel compelled to return the favor. The mind translates kindness into obligation. Refusing feels emotionally painful. Compliance feels socially safe. The manipulation hides inside gratitude. The favor grows slightly larger over time. Each step feels only a little bigger than the last. The brain focuses on the relationship, not the risk. Boundaries blur slowly and quietly. The line moves without being noticed. And the trap deepens. This technique has a name, the foot in the door effect. Small agreements lead to larger ones. Each yes makes the next yes easier. Consistency becomes a psychological prison. The mind wants to stay aligned with past decisions. Even when danger appears. By the time the request becomes serious, refusal feels impossible. The emotional investment is too deep. The relationship feels too valuable. The past choices feel irreversible. The person feels trapped by their own kindness. And the manipulator never forced anything. This happens in friendships, workplaces, and families. Not because people are evil, but because persuasion is a survival skill. Humans evolved to influence and be influenced. Social bonds became tools of survival. And those tools can become weapons. The scariest part is how normal it feels. No dramatic villain appears. No evil speech is given. Only small steps and gentle nudges. Influence disguised as care. Persuasion disguised as kindness. The bait and switch hides behind a smile. Persuasion becomes most powerful when it feels invisible. Not loud. Not aggressive. Quiet and patient. Like a shadow following you at sunset. Always present, rarely noticed. Waiting for the perfect moment. Consider social media for a moment. You open an app for entertainment. Nothing serious. Just a few minutes of scrolling before sleep. It feels harmless and relaxing. But something far more calculated begins unfolding. The first post is light and funny. The second post feels slightly emotional. The third post sparks mild outrage. Each piece carefully placed to guide your mood. Your emotional state begins shifting slowly. And you never notice the progression. This is emotional sequencing. A technique designed to warm up the mind. Like stretching before exercise. Your defenses relax before the real message appears. Your guard lowers without warning. The switch is approaching quietly. Suddenly a strong opinion appears. A controversial idea. A product. A belief. You feel ready to accept or agree. Because your emotions were carefully guided. The persuasion feels natural and justified. Algorithms are not evil masterminds. They are mirrors trained to maximize attention. They learn what excites you and what scares you. They learn what keeps you watching. And then they deliver it perfectly. Over and over again. Attention is the most valuable currency in history. Whoever controls attention controls perception. Whoever controls perception shapes reality. And whoever shapes reality influences decisions. The chain is simple and terrifying. This is why outrage spreads faster than truth. Why fear travels faster than calm. Why extremes attract more clicks than balance. The human brain evolved to notice threats first. Persuasion exploits that ancient wiring. Slowly, your worldview begins to shift. Tiny adjustments over weeks and months. Ideas that once felt extreme start feeling normal. The baseline quietly moves again. The anchor drops deeper into the mind. And then one day, a belief feels completely natural. You cannot remember when it changed. You cannot recall questioning it. The persuasion finished its work silently. The switch was never noticed. Persuasion becomes even darker when fear enters the equation. Fear shuts down logic faster than anything else. It narrows focus and speeds decisions. The brain switches to survival mode instantly. And survival mode rarely asks questions. Imagine receiving a late-night message from your bank. It warns of suspicious activity on your account. Your heart rate rises immediately. Urgency replaces calm thinking. You click before you question. The trap opens in seconds. This is urgency bias at work. The mind believes speed equals safety. Quick action feels responsible and intelligent. Slowing down feels dangerous and risky. Manipulators create artificial deadlines. And the brain obeys automatically. The message tells you to act within minutes. It offers a convenient solution. A simple link to secure your account. Everything feels helpful and protective. But urgency removes the space for doubt. The switch happens instantly. Millions of people fall for this every year. Not because they are foolish. Not because they lack intelligence. Because fear hijacks the brain's decision center. Logic becomes background noise. Emotion takes the wheel. Persuasion often disguises itself as protection. Safety warnings. Exclusive alerts. Urgent updates. Messages that appear helpful and caring. The brain lowers its defenses instantly. Trust replaces skepticism. This technique is ancient and timeless. Villages once spread rumors of danger to control behavior. Leaders used fear to unify crowds. Merchants used scarcity to speed purchases. The tools change, but the psychology remains. Fear compresses time in the human mind. Minutes feel like seconds. Decisions feel urgent and unavoidable. The brain prioritizes action over reflection. And manipulators rely on that speed. Once the decision is made, the fear fades quickly. Calm returns like nothing happened. Only later does doubt appear quietly. By then, the outcome is already locked in. The bait and switch has completed its cycle. This is the turning point in our story. The moment persuasion reveals its darker edge. Because the next stage is not about single decisions. It is about long-term consequences. And they are far more unsettling. Every small persuasion leaves a trace behind. A tiny adjustment in belief. A subtle shift in behavior. Alone, it feels insignificant. Together, they form patterns. Patterns slowly shape identity. Identity is not built in dramatic moments. It forms through repeated tiny choices. The music you listen to. The headlines you read. The opinions you absorb quietly. Each one adds a new layer. Over months and years, these layers harden. They become beliefs, preferences, and habits. They begin to feel permanent and personal. You defend them passionately. You forget where they began. This is where persuasion becomes invisible. Because it blends with personality itself. The influence feels like self-expression. The suggestion feels like personal conviction. The switch disappears completely. Consider how trends suddenly appear everywhere. Fashion, slang, opinions, even fears. They spread faster than logic can explain. Entire generations shift together. Few question the origin. This is collective persuasion. A slow-moving wave shaping millions simultaneously. No single manipulator is visible. No single moment defines it. Yet the results are undeniable. Once beliefs become part of identity, change feels threatening. Opposing ideas feel personal and hostile. The mind protects its current reality fiercely. And persuasion becomes self-reinforcing. The brain seeks confirmation constantly. It searches for proof it was right all along. It filters information selectively. It rewards agreement and punishes doubt. Reality becomes customized. This creates echo chambers. Spaces where beliefs bounce endlessly. Where disagreement rarely survives. Where persuasion becomes permanent environment. And escape becomes difficult. By the halfway point of life, many beliefs feel immovable. Not because they are true, but because they are repeated. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates comfort. Comfort creates certainty. Now we reach a disturbing realization. Persuasion does not always come from others. Sometimes it comes from within. The human mind manipulates itself daily. It edits memories and reshapes reality. And it does this silently. The brain hates contradiction more than being wrong. It prefers comfort over accuracy. When reality clashes with belief, tension appears instantly. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. The mind rushes to eliminate the discomfort. Instead of changing beliefs, we often change the story. We justify decisions after they happen. We rewrite memories to feel consistent. We protect the image of ourselves carefully. The switch happens after the choice. A person buys something expensive impulsively. Minutes later, they search for reasons to justify it. They read positive reviews and ignore criticism. The brain builds a comforting narrative. The decision feels wiser over time. This is post-purchase rationalization. The mind protects its past decisions fiercely. Admitting a mistake feels painful and threatening. So the brain edits reality instead. Persuasion becomes self-defense. The same process happens in arguments. People rarely change their minds mid-debate. Instead, they defend their position more strongly. Evidence becomes an enemy. Identity becomes the battlefield. This creates a strange paradox. The smarter someone is, the better they defend their beliefs. Intelligence becomes a tool for justification. Not always for truth. Persuasion turns inward again. Over time, the mind builds a stable narrative. A story about who we are and what we believe. That story becomes comfortable and familiar. Changing it feels like losing identity. And comfort wins most battles. The most powerful persuasion feels like self-discovery. It feels personal and authentic. It feels chosen and intentional. But the roots often lie hidden in past influences. Forgotten nudges shaping present certainty. When persuasion becomes self-persuasion, resistance fades. No external manipulator is required anymore. The system runs automatically. Beliefs maintain themselves quietly. The switch becomes permanent. When millions of individuals are nudged at once, society begins to change. Not suddenly, but quietly and gradually. Tiny shifts accumulate into cultural movements. Norms evolve without clear beginnings. The change feels organic and natural. Ideas that once shocked people slowly become normal. Opinions once whispered become mainstream conversations. The unfamiliar becomes familiar through repetition. The unusual becomes expected through exposure. Society adjusts its baseline again. This process rarely feels forced or controlled. It feels like progress, evolution, or trend. People believe they are adapting naturally. Few question what influenced the shift. The persuasion hides in plain sight. Media plays a powerful role in shaping perception. Headlines frame reality before facts are explored. The order of information shapes emotional response. First impressions become lasting impressions. and corrections rarely travel as far. Repetition builds familiarity. Familiarity builds comfort. Comfort builds trust. And trust lowers skepticism. The message feels safer each time it appears. The switch happens through repetition. Consider advertising across decades. The same products appear again and again. Logos become symbols of reliability. Brands feel like trusted friends. Exposure transforms strangers into companions. Once trust is established, persuasion becomes effortless. A suggestion feels like advice. A campaign feels like guidance. The line between information and influence disappears. The audience feels informed, not persuaded. Entire markets depend on this invisible trust. Entire industries rely on emotional connection. Entire economies move through persuasion. And most of it feels completely normal. The scale becomes overwhelming. Yet every system has a hidden cost. Every influence creates unseen consequences. Every persuasion leaves a psychological footprint. Society evolves, but rarely questions the direction. The momentum continues forward. And the deeper persuasion runs, the harder it becomes to detect. Because it blends with culture itself. It becomes tradition, habit, expectation. It becomes the air we breathe. Invisible, constant, powerful. The most dangerous bait is identity. When manipulation becomes part of who you think you are, escape feels impossible. You stop asking if the situation is healthy. You start asking if you are the problem. And that shift changes everything. Because self-doubt is the ultimate leash. Imagine a company that calls employees family. At first, it feels comforting and warm. The bait creates belonging and loyalty. The switch removes boundaries and increases expectations. Suddenly overtime becomes a sign of commitment. And exhaustion becomes proof of love. When identity is attached, resistance feels like betrayal. Saying no feels selfish. Leaving feels like failure. The manipulator doesn't need to control you anymore. You control yourself. And you call it responsibility. The bait and switch thrives on guilt. Guilt is invisible and powerful. It makes people stay longer than logic ever would. It convinces victims they owe something. Even when nothing was promised. Even when everything was taken. Consider a friendship story. One friend always supports you in difficult times. The bait builds deep trust and emotional debt. Later they start asking for favors constantly. The switch makes refusal feel cruel. And the friendship becomes obligation. Emotional debt is powerful currency. People feel compelled to repay kindness. Manipulators invest kindness strategically. They treat generosity like a long-term investment. And eventually they demand returns. With interest. The brain hates feeling ungrateful. So it sacrifices freedom to avoid that feeling. The bait creates gratitude. The switch converts gratitude into obligation. And obligation quietly becomes control. Governments and institutions use similar strategies. First comes protection and stability. The bait creates trust and safety. Later come increasing rules and restrictions. The switch feels gradual and justified. And people accept it as normal. Gradual change feels harmless. The brain barely notices slow shifts. Step by step, boundaries move. Expectations rise quietly. And freedom shrinks silently. Until the new normal feels permanent. The scariest part is realization. When victims finally notice the switch, they feel trapped. They think they stayed too long. They think it's too late. And that belief keeps them stuck even longer. Sometimes the switch is invisible for decades. Generational patterns continue silently. Parents pass habits unknowingly. Culture embeds expectations. The bait becomes tradition. And the switch becomes inherited behavior. History is full of examples. Leaders promise freedom, progress, or prosperity. The bait excites hope and loyalty. Slowly, rules tighten, freedoms shrink. The switch occurs without alarm. And people rationalize it as inevitable. Take marketing as another example. A product is advertised as life-changing. The bait excites curiosity and desire. Consumers invest attention, money, and emotion. The switch comes as minor flaws or hidden costs. And yet the buyer rationalizes the choice. Small manipulations accumulate into habit. The bait builds anticipation. The switch delivers minor disappointment. But the mind remembers the anticipation more vividly than the letdown. Memory becomes the chain. And the loop repeats endlessly. Social media influencers use the same principles. Early compliments and attention create excitement. Later sponsored posts and subtle upsells switch the experience. Followers barely notice. Loyalty grows. And persuasion becomes invisible. The mind prefers consistency over truth. Once invested, it bends reality to protect prior decisions. New information is filtered. Contradictions are ignored. Self-deception becomes armor. And persuasion works without effort. Addiction is another form of bait and switch. The first experience is thrilling. The bait hooks desire. The switch brings diminishing returns but increased craving. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. And the user rarely sees the pattern. Fear, hope, curiosity, and desire become tools in every persuasion system. The bait shapes expectation. The switch shifts perception. The mind obeys instinctively. Awareness rarely stops the process. And even awareness can be framed to guide behavior. Consider voting and public opinion. Early promises excite belief. Later policies may disappoint. The bait establishes hope. The switch alters perception. And the public rationalizes the journey silently. By now, the pattern becomes clear. Persuasion often hides behind kindness, trust, hope, and desire. The bait creates attention and attachment. The switch quietly rewires decisions. And when it's complete, it feels inevitable. The final stages of the bait and switch target perception itself. The brain trusts the patterns it has learned. What was once obvious now feels natural. Manipulation becomes invisible. Decisions feel self-directed. And the mind rarely questions its own logic. Consider advertising that claims empowerment. The bait promises self-improvement. The switch delivers dependency or dissatisfaction. Consumers feel growth, but only through consumption. The mind links identity to the product. And the process repeats silently. Even friendships can follow the same pattern. Small favors and attention build trust. The bait feels natural and caring. Later, expectations increase subtly. The switch creates obligation. And guilt ensures compliance. Emotional manipulation often hides in praise. The bait highlights virtues. The switch introduces dependence. Criticism may follow kindness. Attention becomes a lever. And the victim rarely recognizes the shift. Persuasion exploits cognitive biases silently. Anchoring, reciprocity, authority, scarcity, all tools of the trade. The bait exploits these biases subtly. The switch deepens the impact. And the victim rarely connects cause and effect. Storytelling itself becomes a weapon. Narratives are carefully structured. The bait engages emotions. The switch redefines understanding. The brain feels convinced without proof. And the line between fact and persuasion blurs. Social proof magnifies the effect. Seeing others accept the bait reinforces compliance. The switch feels endorsed by the group. Individual judgment fades. Collective behavior becomes the guide. And resistance weakens. Over time, the mind confuses original desire with manipulated choice. The bait becomes memory. The switch becomes reality. Decisions feel personal and inevitable. Manipulation is complete. And the victim believes it was their own idea. The most subtle manipulation leaves no trace. Awareness may exist, but the impact remains. Choices feel free, but patterns guide them. Reflection alone rarely reverses influence. The switch has rewritten the map of behavior. And subtlety ensures longevity. Finally, consider life as a series of baits and switches. Every interaction, every choice, every relationship teaches expectation. Some bait rewards. Some switch confines. Awareness is the first defense. Reflection is the second. And vigilance is the third. The last stage is reflection. You realize the patterns in your own life. The bait and switch is everywhere, subtle, quiet, pervasive. Recognition feels unsettling. Awareness feels like power. But knowing does not erase influence entirely. Every relationship, product, media, or promise has a rhythm. The bait builds expectation. The switch redirects it. You feel in control, yet the flow guides you. Awareness helps you pause. Reflection shows the invisible threads. Knowledge alone is not enough. The brain remembers pleasure and pain. Past bait anchors memory. Past switches shape decisions. Awareness may slow the process, but instinct continues. And habits are stubborn. The ultimate lesson is subtlety. Power rarely forces itself. The most effective manipulation is invisible. The brain follows patterns it thinks are voluntary. Choices feel free. And yet, freedom may only be an illusion. Every small choice teaches the mind. Each reward and punishment leaves a mark. The bait teaches desire. The switch teaches dependence. Life itself becomes a teacher and manipulator simultaneously. Awareness is a weapon. Reflection is a shield. Recognizing patterns lets you choose when to follow and when to resist. But vigilance is tiring. And complete control may never be possible. Stories anchor behavior. Memories anchor expectation. Attention anchors perception. The switch exploits all three. Each influence builds quietly over time. And when combined, they shape not just choices, but identity itself. You are never entirely free from influence. Even now, patterns guide thought. Awareness slows it, but instinct remains. Each decision is shaped by history, biology, and unseen forces. And yet, reflection allows you the chance to reclaim some autonomy. The art of the bait and switch is a mirror. It reflects our desires, fears, and habits. It teaches how easily we are guided. It warns how subtly control enters life. And it challenges us to act consciously. The question remains, how much of your life is truly chosen? How much is influenced, shaped, and guided by forces you barely notice? Awareness is the first step. Reflection is the second. The final step, you decide.